Hello, everyone. I'm Rory McGuire. I'm a professor and extension specialist at Virginia Tech, and I am for the soil because the soil is our future. We don't make any more of it. If you eat, you rely on soil.
Welcome to another episode of For the Soil, a conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii. Joining me in just a few moments, co-host Dr. Eric Benfelt with Virginia Cooperative Extension Community Viability. And today our episode goes international. We have a very special guest from the nation of Malawi. That's right, M-A-L-A-W-I, Malawi. You might think, where in the world is Malawi? Well, it's east of Richmond. No. Yeah, it's way east of Richmond. Matter of fact, it's in southeastern Africa. It's just south of the country of Tanzania and north of the country of Mozambique. It is a landlocked nation with huge water resources and a large lake. And we are going to learn about what they are doing to improve soil quality in Malawi. Let's go to the episode. Welcome, everyone, to For the Soil, a conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii, and my co-host, Dr. Eric Benfelt with Virginia Cooperative Extension Community Viability is joining us today. And Eric, I'm super excited about this episode. It is our first international episode. Would you do the honors of introducing our guest today?
Yes, Jeff, thank you. We're very pleased to have Taona Makunje Chigwenembe with us from Malawi. Taona is the executive director and founder of Creative Solutions for the Environment in Malawi, and she also serves as a board member for New Community Project. And I was recently introduced to Taona through some research work that I was doing in collaboration with New Community Project, and was really inspired by all the work that she's doing related to the environment, food security, work with women's education, and also the vision that she has. We're very pleased to have Taona with us today. And Taona, if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and also Malawi. I think people might not be familiar with Malawi. I had served in Tanzania, East Africa, so a little bit familiar with where Malawi is.
All right, thank you so much, Eric and Jeff. I'm honored to be the first international guest today. My name is Taona Chigwenembe, as you have said, and I'm from Malawi. Malawi is in the Central East Africa. We're in between Tanzania, Mozambique, and Zambia. So that's a little country in between. Little country with but mighty great things happening there.
Give us an idea of the lay of the land of Malawi. Is it mountainous terrain? Is it a mix of, I just want to get a picture of it in my mind, where you live and where you work. Are there deserts, Sahara? You describe it to me.
All right, so Malawi in general is a combination of mountainous places as well as valleys, and then we get a lot of flatlands. But most of the communities that I work with are in mostly savanna areas. And these are areas that are mostly dry throughout the year. Like we get drought for 220 days in a year. And we only have a very short period to catch water when it is raining.
What types of agriculture or livestock production, can you describe that situation with me?
All right, so most communities that I work with in the southern region of Malawi, it's very dry, and most people would love to grow food, and food is defined as corn. I think in America, you call it corn, but in Malawi, we call it maize. So most communities are striving hard to grow maize, which does not do well. And it is not exactly the food that was defined and food that our ancestors were eating. So this is mostly food that was introduced by the colonial rulers back in the past. And I think most of our people were taught that this is the staple food and this is what you need to grow. So a lot of poor communities are, trying hard to buy chemical fertilizers, trying hard to buy chemical pesticides just so they can grow corn, which doesn't exactly do well. But we do have a lot of indigenous crops that do well in these areas as well. As I said, it's a savanna area, and it's an area that is mostly dry, and drought-resistant crops are what thrive and do well, like millet, sorghum, food that most of our indigenous parents used to eat. And that's something that we should be focusing more on, and a lot of other legumes, fruit trees that survive in these areas. So these areas, as much as I said, it's dry for 220 days, but we get a big chunk of rainfall for a short period of time. And during this rainy season, we flood it. The whole valley is flooded. And I think if you heard recently, we experienced Cyclone Freddy, which was pretty much devastating for us and our people. We lost a lot of homes, a lot of people's lives, as well as food. So our entire gardens, as I speak right now, are flooded, and we can't go there and get any food or anything from it. So we are communities that are very in touch with the land, because we do not have the convenience of going out to buy food at a convenience shop. We do not have that option. So we grow our own food. So if you have a garden, that's where you grow your own food on a daily basis. That's where you're getting your food. So if you're experiencing flooding like right now and for a couple of months, and you can't access your food, I think it's a big, big food security issue that we're facing right now.
And Taona, can you tell us about the origins of your organization, Creative Solutions for the Environment, and what inspired that?
Right. So Creative Solutions for the Environment started after we had looked at the environmental challenges that our country is facing. Malawi is, the areas that we work in, Balaka and Neno, these are areas that are food insecure all year round. It's not because we can't grow our food, but because of the extreme weather conditions that we're facing right now. Before, we used to grow a lot of food, and we lived in abundance, and a lot of systems that we used to promote were agroforestry systems, and these were working because we used the indigenous knowledge. And then I think as the years go by, we're experiencing a lot of impact from climate change. As such, our land is becoming drier, and when it's not dry, it's too wet, and we're experiencing flooding. So it's become very difficult for us to grow food. So looking at the challenges that our communities are facing, a lot of people just resort to cutting down trees, clearing out forests so that they would sell the trees for charcoal and other purposes, and then they'd use that to go to the city and other places to buy food for their family. So that just increased the challenges on the land, because you do not solve an environmental challenge by further destroying the environment by cutting down trees. So our organization was mainly started now to start reforestation, to start growing back the trees that used to be there, and also protect the existing forests in the area. So that is also a disaster management, a disaster risk management plan for us to be able to contain the floods and be able to protect our land against flooding water as well. So we started with reforestation projects, and later on we started now with the food security part, because you can't just be focusing on planting trees, but we've got to address the food security issue that was at hand, because most people were going hungry and there was no food in the communities, because it's become very hard to grow food with the extreme weather conditions. So now we started introducing the permaculture, agroforestry systems. Most of these things were existing already. These were, things that our indigenous parents used to teach us. So it's more like trying to reconnect with our indigenous knowledge, trying to bring back what our parents had already taught us and be able to implement that. But also, clearing the mind and letting people aware of what is defined as food. Because food is not necessarily corn. You do not need to have a staple food. There are a lot of other food options out there. Food that can easily grow, and food that is suitable for the area that we're in and the soils that we're working with. So it's more about, okay, what can we grow in this area, and what can work well in this area, and what can we, leave out from our systems, in order for us to successfully grow food. So after studies, we had realized that chemical fertilizers, chemical pesticides, were, two major things that were accelerating destruction to our soil and making it even harder for us to grow anything on these soils. So we started now focusing more on building the soils, how can we restore the soils, and then we started introducing organic farming, how can we do more of organic farming, more of permaculture practices and agroforestry systems in the area so that we can produce more food, but yet we are also taking care of the soil and the land as well. So it spilled over to education as well. So we educating girls, and we know girls are sixth solution to climate change according to the Drawdown project. So in Malawi, I would say it's number one solution because we've got 80% of the people that we work with are women. And imagine if all these women had access to education and they had the right, capacity to be able to do this work. So we started focusing more on educating the girls in these communities as well. So we sent girls to school so that they're able to learn more about climate change and how they're able to, reverse the trend on climate change and the impact it's had on our land and our people.
We're talking today with Taona Chigwenembe of Malawi. And Taona, I hope I'm not mispronouncing that, but
no, you're doing okay.
It's such a pleasure to talk with you. I think here in the United States, our society, our generation here in the United States has become, and I'm going to use the word spoiled, to having instant access to food, any type of food that we want, anytime we want, 24 hours a day. And it's so different where you live. Help us to understand the daily diet of someone who lives in Malawi in a typical day. And you said they're growing their own food.
Yes. So I'm not going to talk about those that are living in the city in Malawi, but I would rather speak for the communities, the poor communities that I work with, and what their daily life looks like. So on a daily basis, you'd find a woman going to the garden, tending after the vegetables that she grew, some sweet potatoes, some cassava, some tora. So just make sure that, okay, I have food for my children. And she goes there to pick that. And that's what she pretty much cooks for the family for that day. So it's mostly legumes, it's mostly vegetables that's put on the table. Those that are able to manage to buy some meats, maybe from their friends, or maybe they're keeping livestock, but very rare circumstances. So it's mostly vegetables and legumes that people are growing and eating.
And Taona, what really drew your interest to soil? I know some of your early conversations with Tom Benevento of New Community Project and David Radcliffe, it revolved around rebuilding soil. Tell us about the early inspiration for that.
Soil is the main catalyst. If you can't do well with soil, then there's not much you can do about food. Because if you want to grow good food, healthy food, and you want the community to be more healthy, more resilient, then you've got to start with the soil. How good is your soil? What are you growing on the soil? The food that we are growing and the life that is within the soil as well. Are there plant species that we're introducing on our land, going to support the soil that we have and the life in the soil as well? So it's all about giving more earth to the soils so that we're able to increase productivity. When we're growing our food, we can grow food, productively, and maybe we can have more abundant food and be able to support our families and have even access to be able to sell to others and maybe support ourselves in other ways. We want to use that money and become, income sustainable, I think, as a household as well. So you've got to start with the soil. No matter what you put in that, no matter what you grow, but if you're not tending to the soil, it's very hard for you to produce any food. So as I said, we are communities that depend on the land and we depend on the soil for it to produce so that we're able to feed our families on a daily basis. And poor communities can't exactly afford chemical fertilizers or chemical pesticides, and that's not something that we promote. But we'd rather promote something that's going to keep the soil more healthy, more strong, keep it more vibrant, so that whatever we're growing there would be able to grow well and be supported as well.
Taona, you
that's why
talked about your organization. I believe it's Creative Solutions for the Environment. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
What can our listeners do to support your efforts concerning that organization and soil health there in Malawi? What can our listeners do?
I think it's about supporting the work that we're doing. We're working with over 3,000 community members and just getting them to learn more about how can they build their soil, how can they create manures, organic farming, how do we do that, and making all those materials available for all these farmers. I think it's a starting point. So if people are able to support our work, whether it's making donations, we have organizations that we work with. I think people are able to make donations to NCP towards our work so that we can reach out to more communities and more farmers and support more homes. Yeah. But also if in your network you have volunteers that would want to work with us as well. I think they might have expertise in soil building. They might have any other expertise as well, just to support our organization. They can also volunteer with our organization and work with us. It doesn't have to come as a donation always, but you can volunteer, your skills, whatever knowledge you have, and share with us so that we're able to make ourselves more resilient, and we can also support the communities that we support.
And Taona, I know you have quite a big vision. I talked to you a little bit about that, with the last time we talked, you had spoken that you had planted about 2 million trees and would like to plant 10 million trees. If you could talk a little bit more about that.
Right. So we plant trees every day. Every day we're planting trees with over 3,000 people. And since we work in dry areas, we water these trees throughout the year until the tree is strong enough and to be able to support itself. So just taking care of the trees is something that's also very important, because we know that if we're going to restore the land, we're going to also plant as many trees as we can. And that's something that we need people to come and jump in and support as well. Our goal is, to plant hundreds of thousands of trees a year. But right now we're only managing to plant last year we planted 400,000 trees. The previous year we had managed to plant 500,000 plus trees. And this year we'd love to plant 1 million trees. So we've been working for years, and so far we have planted millions of trees, and we're happy about the progress that we're doing. And each tree that we plant is well taken care of. There's a person responsible for that tree, making sure that it survives. So as such, we have an 87% survival rate for all the trees that we plant.
I'm just curious, what types of trees grow best in that environment?
So we have fruit trees, we have mango trees, some citrus trees that do very well when we plant them in the actual gardens. Some avocados, some guavas, they do very well when we plant them in the gardens that are very close to the water body. But then there are a lot of acacias, a lot of indigenous trees that do well when we plant them where it's not very close to water, but we're assured that they still survive. So we have Glycidias, we have Fedebias, we have hardwoods, mahogany. These are trees that are also doing very well in this area. But there's a tree species that does very, very well there, and it seems like it's home. It's mopane tree. I'm not sure if you're very familiar with it. It's a mopane tree. That tree thrives in that area. So we've got a separate project that only protects those mopane trees and the forests that are existing there. So we have about 51 forests that we're protecting, and that's over 200 hectares of land that we're protecting.
Unfortunately, our time is up, and I want to thank you for being our very first international guest. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the program. Taona Chigwenembe of Malawi. She is with Creative Solutions for the Environment, and best wishes in everything you do, Taona.
Thank you so much.
And Dr. Benfeld,
Thank
we'll
you
see
for
you on the
having
next one.
me.
Yes, thank you, Taona. It's such a pleasure.
For the Soil, a conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. If you have a specific question about soil health, call your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a soil and water conservation district office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of the Flip Charts, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii.